Good evening. We're going to study in our Bibles from Luke chapter 6. Lord willing, we'll finish chapter 6 this evening. And we're going to get down to doing another lesson on Luke. We'll be in chapter 7. So the last section of Luke chapter 6 tonight. And I've entitled it, It Looks Right, But... So hopefully that'll make more sense as we go along. So we'll look at some of the parables that fit into this model of this construction. It looks right, but... So here we are in Luke, all the things that have happened with him, miraculous conception and birth, and the announcement, and him beginning his ministry, and all the conflict that sort of has arisen from that. And he's kind of built up now to the sermon he's preaching. The Sermon on the Plain, which is awfully similar to the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew, but this is Luke, so it's the Sermon on the Plain. So as we review some of the thoughts of the Sermon on the Plain, we have the blessings on those, or those that are here on the earth that are struggling today have blessings upon them, or beatitudes. If you're having a hard time and you're suffering for God, then you're going to be blessed in the afterlife. And then that's contrasted with people who are living high on the hog and just living it up and maybe not thinking about God, but focused on materialism. There's so woes and curses that are put upon them. They're prospering now, but they have their reward, and they're not going to have a good thing in eternity. They're going to have grief in eternity. And then Jesus turns our attention to each other, how we deal with people. We're told to love our enemies, which is very counterintuitive. Kind of almost seems like by definition, well, if they're your enemy, then you hate them and you're against them. We are to love our enemies. We're to repay kindness on those who abuse us. We're to be generous, very, very generous to everyone. And when it comes to judging, we are not to be judgmental. We're to be generous with forgiveness too. And at that point in the sermon, he gets into some parables. And I wanted to actually review part of our previous lesson. There's a little bit of a dovetail here in our previous lesson and this lesson. So we'll look at Luke chapter 6, verses 37 through 42, and then we'll get into some new material as well. So Luke 6:37, Judge not, and you will not be judged. Condemn not, and you will not be condemned. Forgive, and you will be forgiven. Of course, it doesn't mean that we should never help a brother that's gone astray and, never judging them. The point is that we're not to be harsh and judgmental. We should forgive others, recognizing the forgiveness that we've received from others and certainly from God. Verse 38, Give, and it will be given to you, good measure, pressed down, shaken together, running over, will be put in your lap. For with the measure you use, it will be measured back to you. Just like what he's saying for the same about the judging. If you're going to be all judgy, then you're going to have that same standard on you. If you're going to be all generous, you're going to have the same sort of generosity brought to you. You should be very generous, because God is generous to us. And this is the point where he gets into some parable material. Luke 6:39. He also told them a parable. Can a blind man lead a blind man? Will they not both fall into a pit? Of course, we understand that. You can imagine that. The blind person can't lead a blind person because neither of them can see, and it doesn't work. They're going to fall down, like it says, into a pit. And does it work spiritually? Do spiritually blind teachers maybe sometimes try to lead others? And that doesn't work either because they don't have the spiritual vision to see. You're not going to be able to train the person you're trying to train. So that seems to be the point that Jesus is bringing here and why he's talking about blind people falling into a pit. And he goes on to talk about the idea of teachers. Verse 40, a disciple is not above his teacher, but everyone, when he is fully trained, will be like his teacher. So it's the same idea. For the poor, spiritually blind disciple is trying to learn things, but he's being taught by someone who is toxic and full of every bitterness and judgmental and all these things, and stingy and not generous, they're going to be taught the wrong way. And the disciples are going to be able to learn above that because they're being trained in that negative way. Nobody benefits from that. And it seems to be a criticism of the scribes and the Pharisees who were so judgmental and unforgiving the way that Jesus spoke. In verse 41, the whole thing with the log and the speck, right? Why do you see the speck that is in your brother's eye, but do not notice the log that is in your own eye? So this is, of course, ridiculous imagery. Imagine that scene with someone with a big chunk of wood in their eye, and they're trying, what do you have to do with a little speck in your eye? But if you grow up with the perspective of the blind teachers, then that's perhaps what you're doing. You're not realizing that you're blind and you have a big chunk of wood. And you could be self-righteous and arrogant and just ridiculous to people, trying to point out their wrongs when you have all kinds of problems of your own. You're not really helping anyone in this case. Well, in verse 42, it says, how can you say to your brother, brother, let me take out the speck that's in your eye, and you yourself do not see the log that is in your own eye? You hypocrite, first take the log out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to take the speck that is in your brother's eye. Of course, you have to get your own house in order before you're able to help others. Those are the things we kind of talked about previously. But to summarize that, if you can't actually see spiritually or even physically, you can't really see to help others. You need the help. And so you might think that, to use the way I'm trying to get the title, you might think you look right, you might think you got things together, but actually you're a mess, and you have a log in your eye, and you need to take it out and get those things worked out so that you can, in fact, help others after you've got your house in order. You think that you're right, but you actually have it all wrong. And the blind teachers have taught you to be blind, the idea here. And so, sort of riffing off of that parable, there's two more that come on here in this similar vein. Those are the ones I want to look at in more detail tonight. So the tree looks right, but what about the fruit? What fruit does it bear? What does that say about health of the tree? Or the house looks right, but what about the foundation? Is it really gonna stand in the storm? That sort of thing. And that makes sense physically, and it also, of course, has spiritual applications for us as well. So again, thinking about that connection with the blind can't lead the blind, and we need to take the eye out of the log out of our eye to see the speck in our brother's eye. If we look here in verses 43 through 49, I think there's some of the same resonance that goes on in these verses. Verse 43. For no good tree bears bad fruit, nor again does a bad tree bear good fruit. For each tree is known by its own fruit. For figs are not gathered from thorn bushes, nor are grapes picked from a bramble bush. The good person, out of the good treasure of his heart, produces good. And the evil person, out of his evil treasure, produces evil. For out of the abundance of the heart, his mouth speaks. Why do you call me Lord, Lord, and not do what I tell you? Everyone who comes to me and hears my words and does them, I will show you what he is like. He is like a man building a house who dug deep and laid the foundation on the rock. And when a flood arose, the stream broke against that house and could not shake it, because it had been well built. But the one who hears and does not do them is like a man who built a house on the ground without a foundation. When the stream broke against it, immediately it fell, and the ruin of that house was great. Some familiar parables there. So, the tree looks right. Let's focus on the trees here. The tree looks right, but what about the fruit? So back there in verse 43, for no good tree bears bad fruit, common sense, right? Nor again does a bad tree bear good fruit the same way. For each tree is known by its own fruit. It's common sense. For figs are not gathered from thorn bushes, nor are grapes picked from a bramble bush. You don't go out to a soybean field and expect to pull corn off of a little short thing, and vice versa. You wouldn't go to a cornfield and, where's the soybeans on this? It just doesn't make sense. That's not how it works. It's basic common sense. We understand the physical reality of that. And of course, he mentions the example figs and grapes. You're going to get figs off of these weeds and things. You're not going to get grapes or figs and those fruits off of these junky, thorny weeds. That's not how it works. And so, I was thinking of an example in our life. We have the kids have been harvesting chestnuts for a neighboring farm. So what kind of tree is that? Well, assuming I've got the right picture here, this is a chestnut tree. And the tree looks right, but what about the fruit? Well, I'll tell you it's good. Because the kids make $20 for each bucket they fill up at this place. And of course, the reason they're able to do that is because the owners of this are able to sell those chestnuts to people such as yourself that like chestnuts. I'm actually not one of those people. I don't like any nuts of any kind, but, let's go with this. Chestnuts are desirable by many, and they're worth, I guess, a lot of money. So they're able to pay my kids $20 for a bucket of them. So it's a good tree. It's a great value. It's a good thing. It's not a bad thing. But what about this tree? Well, it's white. It's lovely, isn't it? We have Bradford pear trees. We moved out to our place, and that was one of the things I kind of liked about the place. Look at all these trees. And at a certain time of the year, they bloom, and they're all in a row. Isn't that pretty? The tree looks right, looks good. But what about the fruit? What about the tree overall? Well, it's bad. It's an invasive species. They don't even want you plant these anymore, I've heard. There's all the extension agencies all throughout the whole country that have articles about how you shouldn't have these things. No tree stores or plant stores or whatever sell these to you because they're junk. And they fall apart because in the storm, and we've had that storm here in the summer, and so I don't have all of them anymore. Some of them are just stumps, and I'm still cutting them down. And they smell bad when the flowers come out. They smell bad. But the fruit, it's just these are like the size of a marble or something. You think a pear? A pear? No, these are junky little hard marble things, and they're no good for anything. And birds will eat them, I guess. At a certain point, after the frost, they start to rot, and then they're soft then. They're no good. The first time I moved in, I thought, let's find those pears, and they'll grow. It's something. No, they don't grow. It's just this hard little ball. And they're bad. It's a bad tree. There's no good fruit for us. Maybe the birds have a different perspective, but they're bad. Rachel wants me to cut them all down. I think she's got a good idea there. But of course, these trees are Jesus' illustration here. And the lesson isn't about trees, it's about us. Right? Of course, the next verse even goes on and makes that point. Verse 45, the good person out of the good treasure, the same idea. The good tree makes the good fruit, right? The good person out of the good treasure in his heart produces good. And the evil person out of the evil treasure produces evil. For out of the abundance of the heart, his mouth speaks. So part of what he's talking about is the things we say. Are our words helpful and a blessing to others, or are we cursing and unkind to others? So just like the tree, what do we produce? What is our fruit? Are we the valuable chestnut producing good fruit that's worth money? Is our fruit, our words, are we words of forgiveness and kindness, generosity, wisdom, helpfulness, and honesty? Or like those junky Bradford pears with those little terrible fruit things, are we just junky fruit causing problems? Is our fruit and our words, are we harsh and judgmental? Are we stingy and foolish? Are we unkind and unhelpful? Are we deceitful and hypocritical rather than honest? It's kind of a simple lesson. Don't let your heart be full of evil. Fill your heart with good things. Garbage in, garbage out. Goodness in, goodness out. We can even look at Philippians 4:8, where Paul says essentially the same thing. Finally, brothers, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is commendable, if there is any excellence, if there is anything worthy of praise, think about these things. And by logical conclusion, and not all the garbage things, not all the horrible, toxic things that we could instead be thinking about. What are we filling our hearts with? Hopefully with good things. And then that will lead to good behaviors and blessings on others. So, thinking from trees, thinking next to the houses, the other parable here. The house looks right, but what about the foundation? Is it really a good house? Or is it a problem? Now he starts this with some questions here. Why do you call me Lord, Lord, and not do what I tell you? Didn't get into the house just yet. Well, why is he asking this? Why would anyone address Jesus as Lord? What will be the point of that? Jesus, you're my Lord, but I'm not actually going to do anything. Well, it's kind of a hypocrisy. It's not following through. When I look at someone that this is described, well, he looks like a Christian, but what is he really about? What is his fruit, you might say, right? But Jesus will use the house parable to make this point. Verse 47. Everyone who comes to me and hears my words and does them, well, that's good, right? That's a good thing. If you're coming to Christ, hearing what he has to say, and then obeying it, that's good. This is what I will show you what he is like. He is like a man building a house who dug deep and laid the foundation on the rock. And when a flood arose, the stream broke against that house and could not shake it, because it had been well built. So the house looks right. But what about the foundation? Well, you hear Jesus' words and do them. There's this wise man building the house. Didn't just slap it on the ground wherever, on the grass or the mud or the sand, and not going to go well. But no, instead, he prepared a foundation. He moved all that junk out of the way and got down to the bedrock and built onto that foundation, onto the rock. The foundation is good and firm and solid, and the results, well, even in the face of a big storm or this big bunch of water that came in, the house stands. We're seeing that kind of thing in Florida. There's a lot of water coming in down there. And of course, it's going to destroy most everything down there, but we get the idea. We've seen some images of that sort of destruction. Verse 49. But the one who hears and does not do them, does not listen to Jesus' words and follow him, he's like a man who built a house on the ground without a foundation, just out on whatever is sitting there. When the stream broke against it, immediately it fell, and the ruin of that house was great. So, if you build your house on no foundation, just plop it on the grass, or on the mud, or the sand, especially near the ocean or something, that's not going to work. It's not going to work. But the house might get built. You might build it, right? You might get 2 stories. And it might look nice. You might have a sliding door. Because it's not raining or anything. But there's no foundation. The house looks right, but what about the foundation? There's no foundation, so it's a disaster. The results are that the storm comes in, the waters come, and it falls immediately. It's great ruin. So of course, this is not about houses, it's not about trees, it's not about houses. This is about what it's like when we hear Jesus. We don't do what he says. We disobey and ignore Jesus' words. Then our house, our life, our family, another word for house, we're going to be a disaster. Are we building on the rock or on the sand? You know, Paul talks about this sort of language in 1 Corinthians 10, verse 1. For I do not want you to be unaware, brothers, that our fathers were all under the cloud. We're talking about our fathers back who led out of Egypt, the Israelites. We're all under the cloud, and all passed through the sea, and all were baptized into Moses in the cloud and in the sea, and all ate the same spiritual food, in reference to the manna, being taken care of by God out there in the wilderness, and all drank the same spiritual drink, for they drank from the spiritual rock that followed them. The rock was Christ. Of course, there were different times that he spoke to the rock and hit the rock and water came out, right? That was Christ? Well, that's maybe a little mysterious. Is that a stretch to connect this here? You know, was Jesus a physical rock in the wilderness? I don't think that's exactly the point. Was Jesus a physical rock that we're building a physical house on? No, that's not the point either. But is Jesus the foundation upon which we build our faith? Yes. That's the point of these parables and ideas that Jesus and Paul are both talking about here. And if you think that was a stretch, Paul also said something in 1 Corinthians 3, verse 11. I didn't make a slide for it, but in 1 Corinthians 3:11, he says, for no one can lay a foundation other than that which is laid, which is Jesus Christ. So we definitely have this connection where we're to build on the firm foundation of Jesus Christ.
The chief cornerstone.
The chief cornerstone, all kinds of stones, right? Very good. So, to review that idea, you know, maybe you think you're right, but you might have it wrong. There are other parables here. The blind teachers are teaching you to be blind. Now here in these parables, the tree looks right, but what is the truth of the matter regarding the fruit? We can whether the fruit, you will know it. It will know you. Yeah. Well, what about the house? It might look right, but what about the foundation? Of course, the spiritual applications of all of that. Our spiritual fruit. Our spiritual fruit should be filling our heart with good things. And we're producing good things by having those good things in our heart. And what's our foundation? Are we listening to Jesus like the wise builder, or are we the foolish builder that's not listening, not obeying Jesus, and getting in a disaster? You know, our house will stand if we are listening to Jesus. You know, the Great Commission in Matthew 28, 19 through 20. There's Jesus telling us some stuff to do. He says, go therefore and make disciples. We're told to make disciples. Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all that I have commanded you. Just like he's talking about in this house thing, if you're hearing what he has to say, but not actually doing it, then you're just like building your house on the mud. I don't want that. We need to teach people to observe all that Jesus commanded. And behold, I am with you always, to the end of the age. Are we listening to Jesus? Can we help you in any way? Perhaps you're not. Do you need to be reconciled with God, or do you need to be made a disciple? We can baptize you in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. We can help to teach you to observe all the things that Jesus has commanded us. We can be comforted that he is with us always to the end of the age. He's going to return again. So, we're going to sing a song here. It won't be very long, and that's not talking about how long my sermon is. That's talking about until we're all going to die, until this life is over, or until Jesus returns, or whatever. It won't be very long. And depending on what age we are, it might feel like, oh, that's going to be a long time. Versus, no, I get it. It won't be very long. But I think as we all, different stages of life, we see that becoming clearer and clearer as we grow older. So it won't be very long. Is there anything we can do to help you? We invite you to come as we stand and sing the song together.